What interesting details can we find in the transformations of Lycans and vampires? Which ones could we call the creepiest? And what is so fascinating about the anatomy of hybrids? The answer to these and other curious questions about the descendants of Corvinus is in this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and enjoy watching. I think you remember this story, the ancient blood feud between vampires and Lycans, stretching across distant centuries, which, despite the regular extermination of key leaders and the overall numbers of both factions, keeps becoming more and more bloody each time. Why? Exactly. Because as practice has shown, one of the sides, namely the Lycans, does not shy away from constantly evolving through outside chemical interference with their physiology, at the expense of their once highly prized pure blood status that vampires care about so fanatically. However, werewolves have always shown a more adaptive tendency toward evolution. The first werewolves were those infected by the primordial werewolf William, beasts who could no longer take human form, driven only by the instinct to feed. The second generation of werewolves are the Lycans themselves, able to transform at will regardless of the moon phases. At least this is certainly true for experienced Lycans, and retaining some degree of primary intellect in their beast form. However, in the fifth film, Selene notes that in wolf form, a Lycan is still largely controlled by basic instincts, which makes him more vulnerable when facing a rational and armed opponent. The first full Lycan transformation shown in the Underworld franchise was that of Lucian's loyal companion Reyes, who's also remembered for his very deep voice.
You don't think or you don't know?
I'm not sure.
This metamorphosis includes a detail that will become a hallmark of most Lycan transformations going forward, a sudden growth of bone structures accompanied by the characteristic sounds of flesh deforming. Naturally, the skull and the tissues of the head undergo the greatest, most complex, and probably most painful restructuring, even for an experienced Lycan. When Reyes transforms, we are shown this once again at the film's climax, from the exact same angle. What is most interesting is that the transformation processes in the two scenes differ. For example, in the first scene, the stretching of the wolf muzzle happens faster than in the second one, which is an intriguing detail pointing to the chaotic nature of Lycan transformations, something that'll always be a hallmark of their metamorphosis. This chaotic quality reaches its peak in the visual depiction of the massive, chemically enhanced Lycan's transformation in the fourth film. Interestingly, the first film never actually showed us Lucian's full transformation. We were expecting this payoff in the scene where he painfully removed the anti-Lycan bullets that Selene had shot into him. There was also the moment when Craven shot him with a silver nitrate bullet, and later we see his body trying to initiate the transformation process to better fight off the poisoning, something we notice when the bones in his hand begin to spread apart. Lucian says not yet, because it was crucial for him to maintain his human form to deliver important information to Selene. This particular scene, by the way, appeared in the director's cut of the film. But the main transformation of the first movie is, of course, the transformation of the first ever Lycan vampire hybrid, artificially created by Lucian, Michael Corvin. He was a descendant of the first true immortal, Alexander Corvinus, whose children, after being bitten by a bat and a wolf, became the first vampire and werewolf respectively. Lucian infected Michael with a Lycan strain. The first and most painful Lycan metamorphosis is particularly hard because the initial transformation happens slowly and under the moon, at the moment when Michael is trapped in a fake police car set up by Lucian's men. Radical changes begin with the agonizing deformation of the ribcage. The ribs expand and spread apart, making room for the growth of internal organs. The face starts to take on wolf-like features, but without the complete restructuring of the skull. This stage is typical for all newly turned Lycans, something we also see at the beginning of the sequel. But this is quickly interrupted by the stage of full transformation, which Lucian's men prevent by injecting Michael with an antidote. The crucial piece of information Lucian wanted to pass to Selene was that she had to bite Michael, infecting him with the vampiric strain as well, which Selene successfully does. The Lycan virus had already taken root in Michael's system, so the first stage of his hybrid transformation initially resembled more of a beast-like change, ribcage deformation and the appearance of moderate lycanthropic traits in the tissues of the head, but was quickly followed by a much more radical metamorphosis. Then, Michael's mutation realizes that it needs to incorporate the newly introduced vampiric virus, and we see the wolf-like traits recede in favor of more human ones, which ultimately dominate in the visual appearance of the hybrid Michael Corvin. The main distinguishing feature of his hybrid form that comes directly from the Lycans is the exaggerated expansion of the ribcage, which affects not only the ribs but also the sternum, as well as a somewhat unusual selective enhancement of the back muscles. Speaking of the transformations in the first film, I also want to highlight the awakening of the vampire elder Victor. The elder's stasis is essentially a state of temporary mummification. An elder can be awakened naturally by using blood, which is exactly what Selene does. The image of Victor gaining strength while hooked up to a system pumping red, life-giving fluid into him looks genuinely eerie. And only when it becomes difficult to count Victor's vertebrae with a naked eye does he free his body from the needles feeding blood into his arteries.
Leave us.
By the way, in the fifth film, there was a scene where Selene's blood was drained. According to the characters, this was a torturous method of blood extraction and killing the victim. The needle tips were equipped with mechanisms that widened the arteries to speed up blood loss. In the sequel, we are once again shown an unpleasant deformation of Michael's internal organs, this time rebelling because of his rejection of human food. Selene warned him that ignoring the blood instinct would create danger not only for himself, but also, most importantly, for those around him. Their diet, by the way, consisted of donor blood and cloned blood at that. A bit later, Michael faces off against a truck, and during that moment he undergoes another transformation, where we see that Michael's hybrid appearance has shifted toward more Lycan-like facial traits. But this is not a redesign of the character, it is simply another manifestation of the chaotic nature of Lycan transformations, something Michael still shares as he is half Lycan. Later in the story, his appearance returns to the original design, and interestingly, his hybrid look will change several times. The signature feature of the second film is, of course, its most colorful antagonist, the original vampire elder, Marcus. He is also considered a hybrid, one that is more distinctly bat-like. Amusingly, out of the countless species of bats, the first vampire was bitten specifically by a blood-sucking kind, of which there are only about 2 or 3 species. Marcus is a striking villain, especially memorable for his on-screen appearances and the way he moves through the air, which blatantly defies the laws of aerodynamics. After all, vampires and werewolves are not some kind of demonic, supernatural entities. They are mutants, some of the very first mutants on Earth. Although the fifth film did add a few touches of the supernatural. The most frightening visual of Marcus is arguably his very first appearance after awakening. Before he has had enough blood to fully feed, his hybrid form has not yet completely taken on its definitive animal features, and Marcus spends most of his screen time in this hybrid form. Although he was born an immortal human, his transformation is, in some sense, an attempt to share the fate of his brother William, the first ravenous werewolf incapable of taking human form. Evolution has blessed Marcus's wings with the ability to fold their membranous parts, turning them not only into a powerful and dramatic weapon, but also into a tool for climbing vertical surfaces. The fact that he can use his wings even while in human form demonstrates Marcus's remarkable level of control over his transformation. We are shown a more or less complete transformation of Marcus here. His hybrid form remains consistent, but it is still clear that the process is unpleasant and causes him obvious discomfort. But the main transformation of this installment is, of course, Selene's transformation. Her change is a step into the future, as described by Corvinus, who survived into the modern day. After drinking Corvinus's blood, Selene becomes faster, stronger, and more resilient. There are no visible changes to Selene's appearance during this transformation, or perhaps we simply could not see them through the skin-tight latex suit. In the fifth film, the creators showed us Samira's bodily metamorphosis as she drank the main character's blood to become as powerful as her. We watched the process of her blood being renewed within her veins, and her muscles briefly underwent visible anabolism, as if taking on new physical attributes. We also learned in the sequel that Victor had a container implanted in his chest, much like Tony Stark, to hold the puzzle piece of the key to William's tomb. The most fascinating detail here is that this surgery was most likely done on him while he was awake, as Victor would have wanted to be sure that the key ended up exactly where he needed it. The third film, though many would call it not the third installment but a prequel, tells the story of the Lycan uprising and the difficult fate of Lucian, who grew up as a slave, a sort of domestic pet of Victor. There aren't many details here that are especially relevant to the theme of this video. We are shown several of Lucian's transformations, each still distinct from the others, particularly the one where Lucian's head briefly looks like a grotesque hybrid mash of human and wolf. We were also given a clearer look at the external differences between the first werewolves and the Lycans. The former had more classically animal-like muzzles and much hairier bodies. The fourth film still gives us plenty to focus on, even though this is where the franchise started to lose some of its shine. The leadership of the Antigen Corporation is interested in reviving and, more importantly, evolving the Lycan race. The company's director and his son have been Lycans for quite some time. The director regularly administers injections to his son using genetic material collected from Michael and Selene's daughter, Eve, who carries the Corvinus legacy. Each time he gives him 3 injections: intramuscular, into the upper spine, and into the left eye. The last 2 injections presumably affect the central nervous system, and the results are obvious. Selene is horrified when she encounters the massive, doped-up Lycan, whose face resembles that of the first generation of werewolves. Quint Lane's bodily transformation is largely controlled by his nervous system. There's even a scene where he transforms only his arm. However, controlling his transformation into a giant werewolf is difficult for him. Chaos and evolution are on full display in these scenes. Accelerated anabolism and hypertrophy first overtake the left side of his body, particularly the forearm, and then the focus shifts to the right side, favoring the elongation of limbs, with the left, shorter arm at one point showing greater muscle hypertrophy. This unevenness in transformation follows Quint all the way to the final stage of his metamorphosis, while his reverse transformation shows a lesser degree of chaotic change. Quint boasts to Selene about his powerful regeneration, which she cleverly exploits by implanting a silver nitrate grenade inside him. Once it detonates deep within his body, it proves lethal after all. Oddly enough, despite his high level of regeneration, he never regrows the fingers that Selene had cut off earlier, nor does he heal the perpetually damaged eye that suffers from repeated injections.
I heal instantly.
I'm counting on it.
His father also did not shy away from injections. The first stages of his transformation resemble the mummification of a body. His mutated appearance looks like the classic literary depiction of a werewolf. Within the Underworld lore, he seems almost like a hybrid of a Lycan and Michael Corvin, whose genetic material he also possessed. This werewolf struggles with regeneration but appears to be completely impervious to pain. A similar character in terms of his status of hybridization appears in Underworld 5, the new Lycan leader and main antagonist, Marius. He's the one who captured Michael after his escape from Antigen, took his blood completely, and occasionally drank it to gain a temporary physiological upgrade. The effect was the same, a hybrid of a Lycan and Michael Corvin. The main and perhaps the only visual difference between this hybrid and a traditional Lycan is the secondary transformation of the head into a more human-like form. There isn't much more to say about Marius and Underworld 5 in the context of this video's topic, except perhaps about Selene's next rebirth. The path of water leads her to a sacred place beyond our world, and returning from it not only heals her wounds but also grants her new knowledge, a new hairstyle, and highly practical powers. But one way or another, the story of Underworld is not just the story of an endless blood feud. It is the story of how someone destined to live for 1,000 years might still die tomorrow. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and comment. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. See you next time!